Let's get some reaction to the President's closing address at the party's National Executive Committee, Lekgotla, a little earlier. Joined now by Professor Susan Booysen, Director of Research at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. Professor, good evening. Great to chat to you. So the candidate list being reopened is a reprieve for the ANC, certainly. Do you think it's a vital lifeline for the party?
Most definitely. It's one of the most serious lifelines I think we've ever seen thrown to the ANC. It came just in time to forestall a huge self-elimination by the ANC of its own candidates, which was potentially a huge embarrassment, and probably continuously a huge embarrassment, because the memory of this moment in ANC history, where it missed in its current form deadlines that had been met through candidate registration processes that had been tested in previous and worked for the ANC even in previous elections, that it couldn't muster it this time around. So this was a serious lifeline to the ANC. And of course, the IEC, one can ask serious questions there, interesting questions about the vague judgment that had come, summary judgment that had come from the Constitutional Court on Friday last week, which left sufficient space for the ANC, for the IEC then to come with a technically very precise ruling this afternoon, decision we should call it probably, this afternoon, to link the voter registration opening to the right of voters to stand as candidates. That was probably very convenient, and I think it is quite unfortunate, if not unheard of, that the Constitutional Court had not saw it fit to give the full judgment while it gave the deadline to the IEC by today to announce whether it can do that voter registration weekend, and the rescheduling of certain aspects of the timeline towards the elections. So the space was given to IEC to get its own legal advice, which it said it did, and make probably a technically correct interpretation of that, while I would love to see what the Constitutional Court's eventual fully motivated judgment is going to look like, and whether there could be any ambiguities.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
exactly. IEC
Yeah, we still haven't seen those reasons. The DA, of course, arguing that it gives the ANC an advantage that other parties in previous polls have been denied. They also are very suspicious of the fact that the ANC launched an application legally to open those lists and then withdrew it quite quickly. Of course, they're going to have to come up with the proof of that, I suppose, if they're suggesting that something underhand has gone on. But do you think that they will have any luck challenging this in court, or do you think that's why it's pivotal we need to see the reasons from the Constitutional Court?
It remains pivotal to see those reasons, but the IEC this afternoon also made the very interesting differentiation between those previous 2011 and 2016 judgments that had, by the Electoral Court, full bench of the Electoral Court, that had gone against first the IFP and then the NFP. And in those, and the voter registration process had been closed, so argued IEC this afternoon. Whereas in this case, the IEC said, and therefore justified its decision, the voter registration process has been reopened, courtesy, of course, of the Constitutional Court this Friday. So they say that is the essential difference between those previous court cases, which had seemed to suggest it is not okay to reopen the candidate nomination processes, and why it's now okay to do that.
Is it safe to say, or fair to say, that the party has never gone to the polls in a more embattled position?
Oh, absolutely. You know, on previous cases, like in 2019 in national elections, for example, there was the great hope that Cyril Ramaphosa was a strong leader who could actually unite the ANC and bring the factions to pull together in a new, reinvigorated, cleaned up ANC. But this time around, there is much more skepticism, distrust among voters. They wonder whether the ANC that we saw in Cyril Ramaphosa's post-Lekgotla and NEC address this afternoon is actually ANC, of which the people are picketing outside the building, and the one who couldn't get his own processes right. And they, just by the way, I think President Ramaphosa probably took the very safe route in his briefing 5 o'clock this afternoon. That briefing, which was surreal in some ways, in that it sounded really like a State of the Nation address. It had a State of the Nation structure and that tone for it. And President Ramaphosa definitely didn't appear in his ANC T-shirt when he addressed the nation in this broadcast. And I think it was that the effort to look statesmanlike, to elevate the ANC above all the turmoil and chaos and embarrassments it had experienced, it to look really statesmanlike. This was probably the ANC's not so official launch of its election campaign this afternoon.
You make such a good point, because we were watching it going, gosh, this is not quite what we expected. But you're right, we are just over 7 weeks away, probably, from the election. An Ipsos poll coming out today, and they have noted that it's quite early and things can change, but they're predicting that the ANC in total might only get 49% of the vote. Do you think everything that's going on within the ANC, the internal factional battles, the people protesting outside for their salaries, the crowdfunding to pay salaries, the fact that the Secretary-General is suspended facing corruption, do you think it's going to impact the poll?
Oh, it definitely will. The change that we see in electoral politics in South Africa, even if these changes, these embarrassments to the ANC suggest there should be bigger changes, will probably translate in a few percentage points. But from 2011 to 2016, the ANC saw in those local elections a fairly big decline. And if that kind of decline is repeated this time around, the ANC will be well below the 50% outright majority level. So people are not going to judge everything literally point by point, but the overall image of the ANC is certainly this time around not what it was in 2019. So there are so many factors that will impact on this. Of course, also that opposition parties, there isn't a clear big alternative, and that could impact on the way people decide still to vote, nevertheless, and despite it all, for the ANC. But then there are also many more options, even smaller parties and independents. We've seen that many parties, many voters, also in national elections, when they started having problems with the ANC, just went for small alternatives and said, exercise my right to vote, but not endorse the big players.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. It's going to be really interesting if you look at what Mmusi Maimane of the One South Africa movement is doing. And they're not a political party, but they're supporting candidates at local level. Do you think that people are going to vote on the big ANC issues, the issues and the problems that I've just mentioned? Or are they going to vote for the individuals who are fixing the potholes, who are sorting out their electricity problems in their streets?
Yes. Especially at local level, parties, agencies, individuals who are not the big players gets a lot more attractive, because they are the people who connect at the grassroots level, who help bring those services, or if they're not in a governing party, at least help protest and get access to those services. So at local level elections, it's much more attractive to voters to go for those smaller players. And therefore, in the aftermath of the election, I think in the result, we are going to see, even if the ANC has been given this current lifeline, that there are going to be more councils in which the ANC will come out below the outright majority 50% level. And of course, that will mean it will be the big scramble for coalition politics. And the cases that we've seen in last term, since 2016, where many of the coalitions were put together by a few bigger players and a lot of sometimes unsavory, sometimes not democratic or accountable at all, small and micro players. I think that is the future of what we're going to see after the election between 27 October and 1 November. probably
Yes.
many more of these coalition alliances to get to an outright majority to put together a local government.
Well, let's hope we learn to work in coalitions. Thank you so much, Professor Susan Booysen, Director of Research at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. And of course, we know that on the 20th of September, the Cooperative Governance Traditional Affairs Minister will be announcing the election date somewhere between the 27th of October and the 1st of November.